Wow, you've been diving into some seriously thought-provoking stuff lately. I mean, market psychology, dystopian classics, even a bit of chess wisdom. That's quite the reading list.
It's an eclectic mix for sure. But that's what makes this deep dive so interesting, right? We got some serious thinkers here, all grappling with these big questions about how the world works, how we fit in. It's fascinating stuff.
It really is. And to be honest, sometimes it feels like a bit of a jumble up there. Hopefully today we can help connect some of those dots for you, maybe uncover a few aha moments along the way.
Sounds like a plan. And I think there's no better place to start than with something that touches all our lives.
Yeah.
Money. I mean, you've got Morgan Housel, Jerome Rivera, all exploring the, shall we say, interesting ways we make financial decisions.
I have to admit, when I first saw The Psychology of Money, I thought, oh boy, here we go, another dry finance book. But Housel surprised me. It's less about spreadsheets and more about storytelling, which is not what I expected from a finance book.
I agree. And what's fascinating is how he highlights the power those narratives have in shaping our financial decisions. Think about a time you made a financial decision, maybe based on a hot tip or something a friend told you, rather than doing the actual research.
Oh, tell me about it. Remember that time I got that hot stock tip from a friend of a friend? Let's just say it was a valuable lesson. Expensive, but valuable.
We've all been there. But see, those experiences, as painful as they might be in the moment, teach us a lot about our own relationship with money. And that's where I think Jerome Rivera's The Psychology of Money for Young Adults comes in. He reminds us that this world of finance, it can feel pretty intimidating, especially for those just starting out.
Yeah, and he doesn't shy away from the fact that things are changing so rapidly in the financial world. What I appreciate is that he breaks down those complex concepts like risk management, diversification into clear steps. It just feels less intimidating that way.
I agree. And his focus on exploring new asset classes, things like cryptocurrency, it's insightful. It reflects the reality that financial strategies, they need to adapt, just like the financial landscape is. It's like he's saying, hey, the old playbook might not cut it anymore. You need to be informed.
It's about recognizing those mental traps, those biases that Housel talks about so we can make better, more rational decisions. We all have those financial blind spots. It's about being aware of them so we don't trip over them again and again.
Exactly. Understanding your risk tolerance, that tendency to chase every trend, how easily a good story sways you. That's just as important as understanding how investing actually works, the mechanics of it all.
It makes you wonder how much of our worldview is shaped by these things we're not even conscious of. Kind of unnerving when you think about it.
A little bit, yeah. And it's interesting, this brings us to Vaclav Smil.
Yeah.
He tackles our understanding of the world through a completely different lens. Data, numbers.
I mean, his book, How the World Really Works, it's a fascinating counterpoint to Housel. It's almost like he's saying, okay, enough with all the stories. Let's look at the cold, hard facts.
Right. And he does not hold back on those numbers. He breaks down complex systems, things like energy production, food systems, even the global supply chain, into these digestible and sometimes overwhelming data points. But the point is, he wants us to develop a sense of numerical literacy, because without it, it's tough to grasp the magnitude of the challenges, even the opportunities facing us.
It's like trying to understand the vastness of space, but you've only ever looked at a few scattered stars. You need that broader context, those larger numbers, to really appreciate the scale. But even with all the data in the world, don't we still need narratives to make sense of it all?
You're absolutely right. That's where those two approaches, they kind of complement each other. Numbers alone, important, sure, but they can feel impersonal, abstract. But when you can weave those numbers into a narrative, suddenly they come to life.
It's like they're both saying, here's the data, here's what it means, and here's why you should care. And suddenly those numbers, they aren't just numbers anymore. They're stories about human ingenuity, our impact, the way it's all connected. It's fascinating.
And those stories, whether we realize it or not,
Yeah.
they have this profound impact on how we see the world, our place in it. Which actually brings us to two authors who offer these really different but equally thought-provoking visions of where we might be headed. We're talking Aldous Huxley's Brave New World and George Orwell's 1984, cautionary tales that feel strangely relevant today in this technology-driven age.
It's interesting. They both paint pretty bleak pictures of what the future could hold, but in such different ways. Brave New World always stood out to me because it's less about that in-your-face oppression and more about this, I don't know, insidious manufactured happiness.
It's a world where comfort and pleasure are like the ultimate goals, almost to the point of numbness. It's like Huxley saying, hey, be careful what you wish for, because a world without pain might also be a world without meaning. Makes you think about the trade-offs we make. even unconsciously, just in our pursuit of ease and instant gratification.
Yeah, they've traded true happiness for this kind of artificial contentment, and in doing so, they've given up their individuality, their freedom to even feel deeply. And it's chilling because it's so much more subtle than the in-your-face totalitarianism of 1984, you know?
Absolutely. In Orwell's world, it's all about surveillance, manipulation through language. Remember Newspeak, where words are stripped of all nuance and complexity. It's a world of fear and just totally conformity where Big Brother's always watching.
And the crazy thing is, both of these books, written decades ago, they feel eerily relevant today. I mean, think about social media, the surveillance technologies that are everywhere now, the echo chambers we find ourselves in online. It's like we're seeing pieces of both worlds reflected back at us.
That's a really good point. And that actually connects with James Dale Davidson and William Rees-Mogg, The Sovereign Individual. They make this argument that technology, it could swing the pendulum back in favor of individual freedom.
It's almost like a digital renaissance where we reclaim our agency, our independence.
Exactly. A future where technology actually empowers individuals, gives them more autonomy and control over their lives, their interactions, everything. But then you've got someone like Vivek Ramaswamy in Woke Inc., and he's sounding the alarm about corporate influence.
Especially how corporations might co-opt social justice movements to serve their own interests, right?
Right. And it circles back to that idea of narratives we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
Who controls the narratives in these future scenarios? Who decides what's woke and what's not? Whose interests are being served? Those are questions we should be asking ourselves now as we navigate this increasingly complex world.
It's like we're caught in this tug of war between the potential for technology to, on the one hand, liberate us, and on the other, this very real danger of it being used to control us. And that control, it might not come from a big brother government. It might come from the corporations we interact with every single day. It makes you stop and think about who benefits from the choices we make as individuals and as a society.
Exactly. And that leads us to another really interesting theme in your reading list: how we define success, not just for ourselves, but for society as a whole. You've got Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which kind of throws conventional wisdom about wealth out the window. And then you've got Wilkinson and Pickett's The Spirit Level, offering a completely different perspective.
Rich Dad, Poor Dad, that's a classic for a reason. It really challenges that whole go to school, get a good job, work hard, retire comfortably narrative. Kiyosaki's argument is that financial literacy, creating multiple streams of income, that's crucial in today's world.
Yeah, and I think that emphasis on financial literacy, more relevant than ever, especially with the rise of the gig economy, where the old way of doing things is being disrupted. You might not agree with all of his strategies, but he really makes you think about taking control of your financial future.
Oh, he definitely challenges the status quo. But the spirit level, they take a broader view, more societal. For everyone.
Exactly. Wilkinson and Pickett, their argument is that it's not just about individual wealth, but about the overall level of equality in a society. And that's what really determines well-being. They make a strong case that high levels of income inequality, it's not just bad for those at the bottom, it can be detrimental to everyone.
So it's not enough to just focus on individual financial success. We also have to think about the systems, the structures in place that either promote or prevent equality well-being for everyone.
Right? It's about recognizing our interconnectedness and working toward a future that's more equitable for everyone. They've got all this data showing that countries with lower income inequality, their citizens tend to be happier, healthier, even more prosperous overall. So it challenges us to consider different models of success, models that value things like social impact, sustainability, well-being, alongside financial prosperity.
Finding that balance between individual ambition and collective well-being, it's a big idea.
Huge. And speaking of big ideas, let's talk about the elephant, or maybe the algorithm in the room: technology. You've got Kasparov's Deep Thinking, Laney's 10 Arguments for Deleting Your Social Media Accounts, and Gillen's 2030, which takes this really interesting peek into the future.
Kasparov, the chess grandmaster, writing about AI. It's not every day those worlds collide.
It's a really interesting perspective for sure. And in Deep Thinking, Kasparov basically argues that we should stop being afraid of AI and start thinking of it as a tool, something that can augment our own abilities.
Working with AI, not against it, to solve some of the biggest challenges we face. I like that. But then we have Jaron Lanier, who seems to have, shall we say, a more cautious view of all things digital. I mean, 10 arguments for deleting your social media accounts right now. That title alone makes you stop and think.
Yeah, he doesn't mince words, does he? Lanier really hits on those potential downsides of social media: the addiction, the manipulation, the erosion of privacy, all of it. And he makes a strong case for being more skeptical, more discerning about how we interact online.
It's like that saying, just because we can doesn't mean we should, right? And that leads us to Gillen's 2030. He takes this bird's eye view of the future and predicts some pretty major shifts coming our way. One that really jumped out at me was his prediction about women controlling a majority of the world's wealth by 2030.
That's a huge shift if it happens. Think about it. Everything from investment strategies to what we buy as consumers, all of it would be impacted if that prediction plays out.
And then there's his take on cryptocurrency. He seems to believe that it's not so much a question of if it becomes mainstream, but when.
It really is like the Wild West out there right now, both in terms of the potential upsides and the risks. But that's what's so interesting about this whole conversation about the tech revolution. It's making us rethink everything, how we work, how we think about money, privacy, power, you name it.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what does it all mean? We've covered so much ground, all these different but interconnected ideas. What are some of the biggest takeaways for you?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And, it keeps coming back to this idea of narratives. We talked about it with market psychology, with dystopian fiction, even with the role of technology in our lives. These narratives are everywhere, shaping how we understand the world.
They become the lens through which we interpret information, make decisions, even form our beliefs about what's possible.
Exactly. And I think the more aware we are of those narratives, the ones that lift us up, the ones that might be holding us back, the ones that are shaping the world around us, the more agency we have to shape our own futures.
It's recognizing that we're not just passive bystanders, just absorbing information. We are active participants, shaping those narratives that will ultimately define us and the world we live in. So as we wrap up, here's something to think about. What narratives are shaping your life right now? Are they serving you well, or is it time to maybe rewrite the script a bit? Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time.